Good morning, or depending on when you're listening to this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and I was always told I had a voice for radio, so I've made a podcast all about the Pokémon trading card game. And you're listening to PTCG Radio. Now, a couple of apologies to start off this week. First of all, I'm a little bit poorly this week. I've not been terribly well, and this is why... No, I'm not even going to correct that, so you can see how poorly I am. It's going to be coherent. Just please keep listening. I assure you I've made copious notes and made sure what I'm talking about does make sense. It's why we're getting the podcast a day late. This also might be a shorter one than usual. And I know I've said that on a number of occasions in the past. But the difference is this week I'm not planning on very much. We're not going for Blue Impact, I think was the other half of XY8 that we were going to get to this week. We're just going to talk about the regionals results and a little bit of news. Truth be told, were it not for regionals, I may well have taken a week off this week, but I can't let there be a week of regionals and not give you a little bit of analysis ready for the next lot of regionals. So sorry for being a day late, but you know, I'm poorly sick and the podcast is still going out. So little bit of news. Let's go with some news. Mega Mewtwo EX, there is an error. It's actually been printed with Vanishing Strike, not Vanishing Strike. They've missed the H off. Weirdly, the official Pokemon card website has actually issued that there is a correction on it. Now this is a Japanese card, not the US card. Whether they will now correct that and print it with the H as well, and the one without the H will then become valuable, I don't know. Gonna be honest, not that much of a story. The good news is we now know what our breakthrough pre-release promo is going to be. It is going to be Chestnut, not Chestnut Break. Not a good card. I've told you about it before. I'm not impressed, but you should be aware of it. There is a Lapras in the Golduck Break plus Palkia EX battle deck. Remember, in Japan, they produce these battle decks that are released around about the same time as their sets and have new cards in that can only be gotten from those sets. Like, in fact, Golduck Break and Palkia EX, which are only available in these decks, which is a little bit annoying if you want to buy multiple copies of them, though it does make it easy. We don't have a parallel like that in the UK and the US and Europe and all those lovely places. It is very much a case of just buy the set. I suppose we have the Absol sets and things like that. So yeah, it's not very good. You get to search your deck for any trainer card for 1 energy, but of course, you know, if you're using your attack to search for a trainer card, that's not ideal. Now, the good news with this is that, I suppose the bonus is that we don't have N in the format anymore, so you don't get your hand shuffled in quite as often. I mean, yeah, it's still not good. Now, there is an Aurorus EX box, which is coming in January. Now, we don't know what this Aurorus EX looks like, because we've never seen it before. You're also getting a jumbo version of the card, 4 booster packs, and a PTCGO code card, which presumably will be the Aurorus EX. Now, we know we are getting an Aurorus EX in Rage of the Broken Sky, the second break set, which will be our early February set, so it might just be a reprint of that with different artwork, or it could be a completely separate one. I did tell you about Rage of the Broken Sky there a little while ago. So yeah. Now, something which I don't know if I forgot to mention this or it didn't come out before, but the Mega Aerodactyl EX Premium Collection is coming out. And it's kind of like our Absol box, our Metagross box, our Diancie box, where you get the EX and the Mega EX in the same box. What is weird is that you're getting a Spirit Link with the Mega Aerodactyl EX collection. Now, I've been telling you for a long time on this podcast, because that's what Pokemon have been doing, that you have had a, if it comes out in a set after the Spirit Links were introduced, you get a Spirit Link. If it comes out as a promo in a box, you don't get a Spirit Link. Well, it appears now that Pokemon is going to make sure we have a Spirit Link for all of the Mega EXs from here on out. Just like they never went back and printed Spirit Links for the first few sets in the, in the Mega block. In the X and Y block, don't be expecting them to go back and give us Spirit Links for Metagross, for Absol, and I would love an Absol Spirit Link so much. That card has potential. Or Diancie, I don't see it happening. But if if the Aerodactyl is getting one, then we can probably assume that going forward, all the others will be getting some. And that's kind of cool. So yeah, that's kind of fun. They're getting a new kind of package in Japan on February the 27th. They're getting a Break Starter Pack. It's going to come with 60 random cards, a coin, damage counters, special condition markers, and a rule book. Weirdly, it's going to be a random deck, which is a little bit weird. And it's coming in the same packaging as the original Japanese starter deck. Now, let's not forget that next January is the 20th, or 2016 I should say, is the 20th anniversary of Pokémon. So, you know, it's probably a nostalgia thing. What's also really funky, and I don't talk about sleeves very much on the podcast, but something which I have to mention, they are releasing new sleeves in Japan which look like the backs of the original Pokemon cards. Now, for those of you that aren't aware, in 2001, to about 5 years in, the backs of Japanese cards were changed. The design was completely changed. And now they're giving us sleeves, or they're giving Japan sleeves, but you'll be able to import them, get mates to buy them in Japan. They're all over Facebook. You'll be able to find them. If somebody wants to sponsor me, might even give you a website address. But no, seriously, the point is that these are cool. They look like the old cards. Now, for those newer players, meh. But, you know, one of my first introductions to the Pokemon trading card game was buying in what was then the Japan Centre Bookshop in London. It's now just called the Japan Centre. But it used to be the Japan Centre Bookshop, and I bought some packs of the original Gym Hero set way back in the day. Annoyingly, not enough packs of them, only bought 2, which 30-year-old me sitting here looking at child me going, what have you done? Well, not child me, no, that's an exaggeration, but kind of like teen me. Why did you not buy more of these packs? It makes me a little bit sad. Hey-ho. And just in case Japan hadn't had enough of the mini sets with the Dragon Vault and the Dragon Collection and Shiny Collection and all of that, there is a new one which is called Pokémon Collection. And it's coming out in the end of January. And 32 cards like Pikachu, Altaria, Deden and Sylveon. It looks like a cutesy set. Now, according to Pokebeach.com, Pokémon is a combination of Pokemon, well we got that much, and Kion, which I'm probably pronouncing terribly, and means to be choked up with emotion, a heart-wringing sensation, or the tightening of one's chest. So and I am not endorsing this, but Pokebeach is referring to it as the Pokemon So Cute You Could Die mini set. So just like the Shiny Collection, it's going to be a holo set. And just like the Legendary Collection and the Shiny Collection, and with one exception, the Rayquaza, the, maybe Super Rod, the Dragon Collection, I am willing to bet right now that every card in this set is gonna suck. Could be wrong, but I'm willing to bet it's gonna suck. And a couple other things, and I know I'm just going through items, but these are kind of cool, and I want to let you know what's coming along. So, Legendary Collection boxes are coming along, and this is how the latest actually released mini set is coming out, so this is very important. We're going to be getting a Pikachu EX Legendary Collection box and a Hooper EX Legendary Collection box. And you're going to be getting 5 holos and the EX in question. Remember that the Pikachu is borderline playable, though has low HP. And yeah, now what you are going to have to do is buy both of them in order to get all the cards. So, yeah. You're going to get Pikachu or Hooper EX, 5 full-art legendary Pokemon, the corresponding pin of Pikachu or Hooper, and 5 booster packs of previous sets. Which does then raise the question, where are all the non-holos coming from? Essentially, the 12 kind of impressive full-art holo-y cards are coming in these boxes, but not the just the regular non-holo cards. Which means, and try and keep up here, we've had Double Crisis and Dragon Vault, which were mini sets that we were given as in these little boosters of packs, little blisters of booster packs. We had Radiant Collection, which came out bundled with Legendary Treasures, and now we've got Legendary Collection, which is coming out in these 2 boxes, and presumably the non-holos are just going to be dumped into one of our future sets. Hopefully that doesn't mean we've got a reprint/dumping set coming up. Think Legendary Treasures, or to go back a bit, Nope, it's completely gone. I'm going to look up the name of that set. It just dumped a whole bunch of rubbish cards, but gave us some Lost Zone cards. So, swings and roundabouts. I'll look that up while I'm chatting away here. So, yeah, kind of interesting. Oh, and you're going to be able to buy a metal tin that's got some holo cards and booster packs and notepad and pencils. We've talked about that before. And the World Championship decks shouldn't be terribly surprising at this stage. We don't know what all 4 of them are, but we know that we are getting Rowan Stavanoff's Landorus deck, which is being called the Flying Hammer, or Landorus Crobat. We know that we are getting Patrick Martinez's Seismitoad EX deck, or indeed Seismitoad Crobat deck, which is going to be called Punches and Bites. And we know we are going to be getting the lovely Jacob Van Wagner's deck, and I call him lovely because he came on the podcast, which makes me love him forever. His Blastoise deck, which is called Honestoise, which I don't get it. Maybe there's a reason behind it. Maybe we'll have to have him on again to ask him at some point, assuming, of course, he is willing to come on again. Maybe he's had enough. I would hope not. I like people who come back on the podcast. They become my favourite people in the world. That might sound like an exaggeration, but like I said, I've been poorly sick, so I'm just rolling with it. The set I was thinking of, which you've probably all guessed by now, was Call of Legends, which was a largely reprint set. Hopefully we've not got one of them coming in the future. And to be fair, with our November set being Breakthrough and Breakthrough 2 being our February set, I don't think we're in line for a reprint set anytime soon. Because for those of you that weren't playing, and I was playing when both of those sets were released, and I don't think they were the only 2, but they're the only 2 since I've been playing, it's really disheartening. You're going to wait 3 months for every new set, and then a new set finally lands and it's garbage and largely reprints. It's not much fun. So that's the news, other than to say a small correction from last week, which is that I told you that Mega Mewtwo EX hits for weakness, which is bringing back Mewtwo Wars. Half of that sentence is a lie. It doesn't hit for weakness, but Mewtwo Wars are still coming back. I think maybe you focused, and I don't blame you for this, but maybe I focused and you focused a bit too much on the weakness last week. This is still going to be a hell of a good attack, and the best counter for it is still going to be Mega Mewtwo. I suppose maybe Mewtwo EX in Expanded, but certainly in Standard. So don't think this is going anywhere anytime soon, ladies and gentlemen. It's gonna be good. Now, as we look into looking at regionals, I have got to give one of my biggest congratulations ever to Remy Cognot, and I'm probably mispronouncing your second name there, Remy, for which I apologise. He has become, I believe has become one of my very favourite listeners ever, because, and he emailed this on the 5th, which was, back on Monday. He emailed me the top 8 from Arizona and Texas regionals, and he emailed me seniors as well, which is just amazing. So, wherever you are, Remy, I thank you very much. I haven't replied to your email yet. I will, but consider this a reply for the time being. Thank you very much for the email. Stupidly well appreciated. And if you want to do this in future weeks, I think there is a best friendship brewing right here. So, what I find weird, and I've seen these, obviously, like I always do, when these results are announced, I start digging around the interweb and looking for all the information I can. And I've seen people looking at the top 16 decks and analysing the top 16 decks, and I don't really know why. Because we don't look at top 16 cut. Nowadays, the way the game works, we have a top 32 cut, and we have a top 8 cut. So you cut to top 32, play a few more rounds, cut to top 8. I'm not a fan of looking at the top 16 decks, so I will look at the top 16 for a little bit at the end, because the information is readily available out there. But just so we're clear, I'm interested in the top 8 decks. And there's 2 reasons I'm interested in the top 8 decks. Number 1 is, that's what we cut to. Number 2 is, if you're making top 16 but not top 8, then you're falling a little bit short of what is essentially the benchmark of awesome in the current tournament map that we have, which is top 8. And let's say a deck is consistently getting 9th to 16th. I don't want to be reporting on that as one of the top decks if it can't break through to top 8. And as we've got the seniors information, we are absolutely going to have a quick look at them as well. And if you're wondering, well, hang on a second, Ross, why am I listening to you talk about regionals when I can read this stuff on other websites? 2 reasons. Firstly, just literally lie there doing nothing and let me tell you, That's a lot easier than reading. And secondly, I haven't got to sit here and type, so I can go into a bit more detail and say a lot more than people who are going to go through it in an article. So, the top 8 in Arizona. In 8th place, we had Brandon Smiley with Vileplume Miltank. He becomes my new favourite person in this tournament because you know I've been looking at that deck. 7 was Sammy Sosa with Yveltal, Archeops and Agetsis Tech. 6 was James Dealey with Yveltal Sableye. 5th was Tyler Nomura with Blastoise. 7 was Xander Bennett with Turbo Rayquaza. 3rd was Elijah Kovitz with Yveltal Sableye. 2nd was Jonathan Perenada with Blastoise. Again, if I'm mispronouncing names, don't hate me. And first was Israel Sosa with Yveltal, Archeops, Getsits. And moving into Texas, in 8th we had Rodolfo Falcon with Vileplume Miltank. In 7th we had Christopher Schmansk with Blastoise. 6th we had Derek Udy with Night March. 5th we had Brad Curcio with Yveltal. 4th we had Caleb Gedimer with Blastoise. 3rd we have Austin Bentheimer with Blastoise. 2nd we had Jason Klaczynski with Blastoise. And the winner was Michael Pramwat with Seismitoad Crobat. Which is interesting, of course, because that makes the final of Texas a rematch of the World Championship final with Blastoise against Seismitoad Crobat. So interesting that Seismitoad Crobat came out on top. So, here's a few of my thoughts just kind of chucked out there. First of all, a lot of those names sound familiar to me. I'm not from the US. I've never played in the US outside of Worlds, but that's not really a US tournament. I just follow the results online, and we see this time after time after time. It can't be a coincidence. Israel Sosa came on the map. I believe he was a chap that won 2 regionals in a row a couple of years ago. Tyler Nomura has, he's got a reputation as a very good player. Brandon Smiley won US Nationals in 2014, if I remember correctly. Michael Pramawat has come second at Worlds in the past. Jason Klaczynski, I shouldn't need to tell you much about him at this stage. So there's an awful lot of good players still doing well. So for those people that are saying the game is entirely luck, blah, 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 why do the good players continually do well? Secondly, it struck me that Sammy Sosa and Israel Sosa were playing the same deck in Arizona and both made top 8. I'm seeing some kind of familial connection here, I believe. Could be wrong, just chucking it out there and seeing what happens. So, if we have a look at these decks, we start seeing some patterns emerging quite quickly. Now, one thing is, no Seismitoad Giratina. And I feel a little bit vindicated about this. Now, I don't know how clear I made this on the podcast last week. I can't remember exactly what I said. But in my head, I was thinking Blastoise is the best deck, and I don't get Seismitoad Giratina. It's got too many bad matchups. Now, to be fair, Seismitoad Crobat did win in Texas, but of the 16 people in top 8 in, both of these tournaments, that is the only Seismitoad deck we saw, which is crazy. Unless, of course, it was really good in the undeveloped metagame at the Arena Cup in Germany, and not terribly good by the time we get into US regionals, which I'm personally thinking might be the case. I never liked it. First of all, against Yveltal, unless Seismitoad flips really well on hammers and lasers and super scoop-ups, Yveltal's going to take down the Seismitoad slowly but surely. And as soon as your opponent brings out Giratina, you've got 4 energy on you. Yveltal will eat you for breakfast. The other thing is, there are really here, and it's very obvious, there are 2 good decks. Now, there's one Night March that came out, 6th place in Texas. There was one Turbo Rayquaza, 4th place in Arizona. And that's it. Other than Yveltal and Blastoise. Oh, sorry, and obviously the Seismitoad Crobat with which Michael Pramwat won Texas. Now, we got 2 Vileplume Miltank decks, both made 8th, which makes me a little bit nervous, because it seems that those decks can essentially make top 8, but both of them lost in top 8 as soon as you got down to single elimination. So, I'm not willing to really accept it as a, real budding deck. I mean, it is the 3rd place deck, but I'm not, I'd take Seismitoad Crobat as the 3rd place deck right now, because I'd take a win over 2 8th places. But then again, like I've said on the podcast many, many times in the past, you've got to be really, really careful when you're looking at one result in one tournament for a particular deck. Now, So Michael Pramwell is one of the best players in the world and has been for many years. He's done exceptionally well at a number of tournaments. There was a little while back he'd cut something like 4 or 5 worlds in a row. He is an exceptional player. So if he's the only person that's getting top 8 regionals with a deck, I don't know if that's necessarily the deck being good. It could be his list. It could be his play. Heck, it could have just been that he hit really good matchups all day. But then again, Blastoise would not be a great match when he took that down in the final, and that was piloted by the best player in the world. And I think that is an objective statement at this point. So yeah, that's that. One Turbo Rayquaza, again, Turbo Rayquaza, either it goes or it doesn't. Obviously, that particular person's went. One Night March. Night March is a decent deck, but the matchups just aren't always there. It's also interesting that when Yveltal was quite big, one Night March managed to, sneak up into the top 8. Because, of course, Night March is very good against Yveltal, which I think explains why there was a Gets This Tech. I will talk about the Gets This Tech in a moment. But really, it just comes down to Blastoise. Now, Arizona had 2 Blastoises in the top 8, and Texas had 4 to make a total of 6. Arizona had 4 Yveltal in the top 8, and Texas had, to be fair, only 1 Yveltal. But clearly, we've got there's a real gulf here, and I've seen some other people try and put decks into tier lists, and I don't like tier lists. Tier lists are ridiculous. Plus, somebody always insists on doing a tier 1.5, which just seems silly. But really, the way I like to look at it is the best decks. Do we have particular decks which separate themselves from others? And we do. Here, we have Blastoise and Yveltal that are clearly and obviously the best decks. Then we've got Vileplume, Miltank, Turbo Rayquaza, Seismitoad, Crobat, and Night March, which are viable decks, but not particularly great. If you want to be winning an expanded tournament at the moment, and bearing in mind we've got 2 tournaments from one weekend that happened at the same time, it's going to be very interesting this coming week to see the reaction. Are people going to jump on the Blastoise Yveltal bandwagon, or are there going to be a rise in decks which are going to try and take this down? For instance, things like Wobbuffet, which blocks Blastoise. Or things like, for instance, a rise in Garbodor, which again will block Blastoise. I don't know is the honest answer. But it's going to be interesting to see how this will work. Whether people react or just jump on the bandwagon. And the thing is, as I tried telling you last week, Blastoise doesn't have any really bad matchups. Like any really bad matchups that I can think of, other than, of course, the obvious ability lock. It's super stupidly consistent, and it really is a case of, it just one-hits everything. Now, it does fall down to things that can one-hit the, things that can go fast and one-hit KO the Caldeo, because once a couple Caldeo go down and you're relying on things like, superior energy retrieval to get the energy back, that can be an issue. Other than that, you really don't have many bad matchups. And, you might even see a rise in something like Turbo Rayquaza, because Turbo Rayquaza can one-hit KO the Caldeos in Blastoise and the Yveltals, really, really quick. The thing is, it is vulnerable to Archeops because you have to evolve the Rayquaza. So, I leave that with you, I suppose. So, let's have a look at some of these lists in a little bit more detail. Vileplume Miltank, what happened with that? Now, I told you with my experience of this, I'd done a bunch of testing, I'd been to a tournament with the deck, and what I essentially found was one of 2 things happened every single solitary time. Either you are going to win because you train lock your opponent and hit for 80 until your opponent loses, or you are going to sit there and lose because your opponent can one-hit KO a Miltank. And that's it. That's all you can really do. And what I said to you was you need another attacker. Now, personally, I'm a very big fan of the new Noctowl coming out in our November set. I'm going to be trying to incorporate that bad boy in. But we have other options, and Brandon and Rodolfo, who made 8th place in the 2 tournaments respectively, they had different opinions. Brandon's gone for Aegislash, Mewtwo, and Slurpuff, which just is there for consistency. Why Mewtwo and Aegislash? to do what you need to do. So let's take a couple of examples. Let's say something like Tyranitar, a deck to which I lost at this recent League Challenge. Well, if Tyranitar comes out, then either they've got 4 energy on and Mewtwo's hitting for a lot of damage, or most likely they've got a double colourless energy on, so Edge Slash just blocks them attacking entirely. Which means if they've got an EX, if they've got something that takes special energy, you use Edge Slash, bearing in mind he doesn't need any specific energy to attack. All of these are colourless attackers, which of course helps. Really helps. Miltank, colourless. Edge Slash, colourless. You'd put metal in to make his attack do more, but you don't have to. And Mewtwo, colourless attacker. Heck, you could even put in a Dimension Valley or two and some Psychic Energy to use Mewtwo's second attack for 120. Side Drive, I think it's called, if I remember correctly. I played it enough, I really should know this. I'm pretty sure it's called Side Drive. And so if they use something with special energy, you use Edge Slash. If they use something without special energy, then you put Mewtwo up to try and take it down and just trade favourably with it because you're hitting for quite a lot of damage. It really is a quite ingenious kind of deck, and you hopefully seeing it starts to take down some of the things. You know, the other deck I had trouble with at the League Challenge when I played Vileplume Miltank was the Groudon deck. Well, Groudon, what are they going to do? If they try attacking the Edge Slash, they've got to stop using strong energy. And if they put 4 energy on, Mewtwo's doing really quite nicely. And as soon as you take down 1 or 2 Groudons, they are not going to have enough non-strong energy to keep attacking. And as soon as they put down a strong energy, you stick Edge Slash up. It really is. I love this deck. It's a really, really inventive deck. Rodolfo went a little bit more straightforward, but equally as cool. He went with Regice. Now, the downside of Regice is you need a DCE and a water, and even under Train Lock, your opponent can play something like a Team Flagrant or a Xerosic to get rid of the double colourless energy, and then you really are kind of screwed. But let's ignore all of that. If you're against an EX attacker, you put Regice up. If you're against a non-EX attacker, well, most non-EXs can be taken down quite nicely by Miltank, because you're doing 80, and most EX attackers don't have all that much HP. And don't do all that much damage. So, again, quite an inventive little thing. But neither of them made it past top 8. Because, again, both of those would not do terribly well against Blastoise. Because Regice, you can just stick up something like an Articuno, which could one-hit it and take an extra prize, while you're... It depends on flips, of course, because Articuno's attack is flippy. But even if you 2-hit it, they're not one-hitting you with Regice. And it beats Edge Slash because you've got your Caldeo taking out the Mewtwo, and if they use your Mewtwo, you've probably got a Tech Mewtwo. Something like Yveltal, you don't need to use a double colourless energy on Yveltal, and Yveltal, after a turn or two, is actually more efficient than Mewtwo because you can sit there and... You know, you're doing more energy than Mewtwo. You've got the 20 base damage plus 20 for each energy, whereas Mewtwo is just 20 for each energy. And against the Regice build, well, maybe you're playing something like Absol, even if you're not. Regular Yveltal, okay, you're only hitting 30 per turn, while you build up energy on the bench, while the Regice is 2-hitting you. You see where I'm going with this. I wouldn't take that against either Blastoise or Yveltal, which were the 2 best decks. Think about something like Seismitoad, Crobat. Okay, Regice is quite good against Seismitoad, and Edge Slash is also quite good against Seismitoad. But really good players can play around it. You put water energy down against Edge Slash, and, you know, against Regice, you can take it down with Crobats and stuff if you play carefully and you drop your damage counters down correctly. So... I love them both as decks. I think they're good decks against the field, but the problem is, by the time you get into Top Cut, they don't have good matchups against the decks you're expecting to see in Top Cut. I'm not terribly surprised they didn't get any further. I don't have much to say about Night March. It's the same as it's always been. It really is. So what about Archeops? Well, Archeops is an interesting one. It's another kind of like the Vileplume deck we just talked about, good against the field. Archeops does nothing against Blastoise. Archeops does nothing against Yveltal. Archeops is really good against Vileplume because it stops them getting the Vileplume out, so that's kind of cool. It does nothing against Night March, And it is moderately useful against Seismitoad Crobat, because it can stop them getting the Crobats out. Okay. So it's not good against the top 2 decks. And it's moderately useful at best against the other relevant ones. But against the field, when I say the field, I'm talking about the random decks. The decks are all here, there, and everywhere. Things like random metal decks. They didn't make top 8, but metal's still out there. Archeops is really, really going to help you against that. Against things like, Virizion, Giratina, Leafeon, it stops them getting the Leafeon. Again, now Vespiquen was not big this past weekend, but even something like Vespiquen can get completely shut down by an Archeops. Again, good against the field, not against everybody else. So, what about this whole business with Ghetsis? Now, this is something I've spoken about on the podcast before, and you'll notice there's only 2 people on my list that did play it, which were the Sosa, I'm going to say brothers, could be wrong, but I'm going to call them twins, despite the fact they're almost certainly not twins. The Sosa twins, it's just a better name. They played Ghetsis, and it's like I said previously, by the time you add in Computer Search, which is back and expanded, Jirachi, which is back and expanded, and VS Seeker, and your Battle Compressor, and you're probably playing 3 or 4 in an Yveltal list, probably 4. If you're playing Archeops, you need 4 to get the Archeops and the Dark Energy into the discard pile for Maxie's Hidden Ball Trick and Dark Patch, respectively. It's really not that, assuming it's not prized, it's really not that difficult to get your 1 copy of Ghetsis out on turn 1. You needed to get your Computer Search, or your Jirachi, or one of your Level Balls, or one of your Ultra Balls, or a Battle Compressor VS Seeker combo. Oh, and you've got Acrobikes and stuff to help you as well. Maybe Trainer's Mail. It really is not that difficult to do. And if you can go first and get a turn 1 Ghetsis, it can completely screw over your opponent. We are playing less supporters now. We don't need to play as many supporters now, because we've got things like Shaman, or Jirachi, or Computer Search. Imagine if your opponent's got a Computer Search and a Level Ball and an Acrobike and a Trainer's Mail in their opening hand. You get rid of all 4 of them and leave them with 2 energy and a stage 1. They ain't winning that game. And let's not forget that Yveltal's a kind of deck, in a way that Miltank never can. You can just build up an Yveltal and sweep in a few turns, because the damage builds up quickly. It's a really clever tech, and it makes perfect sense. Yveltal's one of those decks that's good, but not great. It's got pretty good matchups against the field. It doesn't out and out lose to anything. But if Blastoise gets a fast start, you're probably going to lose. I told you when I played against Ryan Morehouse at the League Challenge where I played Yveltal. The fact of the matter was, we both had really good starts. I lost by a turn. Why? Because we both had really good starts. And Blastoise will beat Yveltal when you have an equal start, most of the time. But it's a consistent deck, and it's a kind of deck that allows you to outplay your opponent and then draw dead while they beat you in a mirror match. And, it's got a lot of options. So, playing something like Ghetsis, you can literally just put 1 copy of Ghetsis in there. It's not where you don't really want to play 4 of it, because it's not great all the time. Remember that 1 copy turns into 5 with the S-Seeker anyway. It's not the kind of deck you want to play 4 of. You play 1 copy, but then expanded, it really is not that difficult to hit your 1 copy of Ghetsis on turn 1. It really isn't. People are hitting Maxies on turn 1, and you have to get that in the disc. You have to get that as the only card in your hand. Ghetsis is so much easier to get out. So, yeah, if you can completely screw over your opponent early and then just sit there smacking with Yveltal, you'll win the game most of the time. And the weird thing is, in terms of top 8, that really is all there is to say about these particular results. It's startlingly narrow. Of the 16 top decks, I think 11 of them were Blastoise or Yveltal. And then you had 2 Vileplume Miltank, 1 Turbo Rayquaza, 1 Night March, and I've missed one. I don't know which one I've missed. Oh, Seismitoad Crobat. I don't know why I keep missing that. And then, you've got 6 Blastoise, 5 Yveltal. It really is a 2-horse race. Let's not forget, ladies and gentlemen, that this is far from over. So, before we finish off with the seniors, I want to go to 60cards.net. Now, 60cards.net is not a site I mention very often. It's not a site I use very often. It's a perfectly nice site. It's got some interesting articles. But it's not one I need to use very often because a lot of the information I get from elsewhere or I just kind of figure out myself from observation. I know that sounds really big-headed, I do apologise. Check out 60cards.net, it's a good site, and as I've always said, if I use a site, I will give it a little bit of credit. They looked at the top 16, I don't know why they looked at top 16. It distorts the figures a little bit, it makes Blastoise look a lot better than Yveltal when it really isn't. But hey-ho. But just looking at top 16 decks that didn't go anywhere else, there were a couple of Tool Drop made top 16. This is a deck that's ripe. You know, there's a lot of EX-heavy decks, Blastoise, Yveltal, Seismitoad. If you get Tool Drop set up, remember with Dimension Valley, it attacks for 1 energy. It's really susceptible to Trainer Lock, and now that Lissandra's Trump card has been banned, you know, if your opponent drops a big startling megaphone, you will lose the game, but it can take down EX decks really quickly, and a lot of people, they're starting to not be able to find room for startling megaphone in their decks. There was a Vespiquen Giratina Leafeon, there was a Virizion Giratina Leafeon, there was a Vespiquen Flareon, there was one of the Rayquaza electric decks I mentioned last week. Nothing too major, all decks which have potential. And with the exception of the Giratina deck, all decks that can one-hit KO EXs. And to be honest, you need that. With Yveltal and Blastoise really holding up the format, you need that. Now, of course, one thing you can see at this point, if there are 2 decks which are really starting to take over the format, they are easily countered. I.e., Leafeon destroys Blastoise. Jolteon's pretty good against Yveltal. You know what else is? Raichu. And this is not a great idea, just bear with me for a second. If you played a Leafeon Raichu deck, you could run right through those 2. And yes, I know that Archeops is a problem. But, you know, play Ability Lock. Boom. Put a Wobbuffet active. There we go. Now Archeops' ability is turned off and you can evolve whatever you like. Or you just play the Eevee which evolves when you attach an energy and Archeops doesn't matter. Or you play Wally which is not evolving from your hand, i.e. there are ways around it. It's only evolving from your hand that Archeops turns over. Evo Soda, Wally, Eevee's ability, they go through Archeops. And that would take down both of the big decks. Would they be able to take on something like Night March or, you know, Vileplume Miltank? I don't know. Do some testing. But the option is there, is what I'm saying. This is what happened. I know I keep mentioning this. I do apologise. It's like the one good thing I've ever done. So please forgive. No, I've done a couple. But one of the very few good things. ECC in 2014 was my big example of this. The format shook out to 3 or 4 decks, which made it ripe for counter decks. And that's what I did. Expanded is ripe for counter decks. I'm not saying Raichu Leafeon's a way to go. I am saying it nicely counters both the top decks, which together are basically... I mean, they are 2/3 of the format in terms of top 8. Of course, you could also come across a whole bunch of Vespiquen and related decks and just crash and burn, but I'll leave that one up to you. So, they gave a couple of little observations, some of which are very important, some of which aren't. So I'm not going to take all of these observations, but I am going to go through a couple of the observations from 60 cards, which, you know, I've also heard from other people, but let's give the credit to 60 cards for now. Hex Maniac, huge. Loads of people playing it, really useful. This should not surprise anyone. It's an amazing card. Let's not forget, Hex Maniac turns off Blastoise. Hex Maniac turns off Archeops, which are in the top 2 decks. Sableye making a comeback. Well, that shouldn't surprise anyone. You get to recover 2 trainers, or 2 items. Dark Patch, Laser, Hammers if you played them, which you probably don't. It's VS Seeker to get more, you know, almost infinite Lissandras. I could keep going, but hopefully you see the point here. Yeah, it's got 70 HP and it's easily killed, but if you're playing a 7 prize game, it ain't the end of the world. I'm also hearing that the Blastoise decks are starting to go away from Jacob Van Wagner's list a little bit. Now, don't get me wrong, I can't imagine they're not playing I suppose the engine is the way I would call it, because why would you not? It's stupidly consistent. But, people are starting to tech in things like Regice, which you should be, it blocks the X's, and Kyogre EX. Let's not forget that Kyogre EX does 50 to 2 bench Pokemon. Hey, Night March. Hey, Vesperquen. Yeah. You can really do some damage. And it's got a fairly large HP. Something that other Blastoise players have been doing is teching in Tropical Beach. Why Tropical Beach? How often are these players using Rough Seas? Seriously, take a second to think about it. When you play against these Blastoise players, I don't usually use Rough Seas. And the reason is, Blastoise players either run through you or you one-hit them and they lose. Most Blastoise players, either you're one-hit KOing their Keldeo and winning, or you're not winning. It's as simple as that. See, if you're two-hit KOing Keldeo while it's one-hit KOing you, Rough Seas ain't really needed, ladies and gentlemen. What does Tropical Beach do? It gives that extra level of consistency. Now, I've spoken to a couple players I really respect in the UK, really good players, Luke Kirkham and Ryan Morehouse. And both of these people have basically said to me, you can't just pick up Jacob's list, all the engine. The engine is kind of like the basic skeleton that makes it run as well as it does. You've got to put in the time and effort and the practice to actually make it work. Makes perfect sense to me, if I'm honest with you. Makes absolutely perfect sense to me. Because the reality is here that, you need a bit of practice with the deck. But it never hurts to have more consistency. You don't really need Rough Seas. Hopefully you don't need Tropical Beach. But if you don't get the setup on turn 1, by which I mean the Blastoise on the bench and the Keldeo active, you are sitting there doing nothing. Wouldn't you rather fill your hand to 7? And you'll only use Tropical Beach once or twice all game, but it could be the difference. So yeah, there we go. So, let's have a very quick look at seniors before we get on out of here. So, at seniors in Houston, we had, from 1st to 8th in order, Blastoise, Giratina, Night March, Sableye Bunnelby, which is, so you'd use Sableye to reuse cards, maybe like, what's that card? The one that, Trick Shovel that discards the top card of their deck, or just reusing lasers, Lysandres, etc., or using Bunnelby to mill. Donphan, Toad Giratina, Vesperquen Flareon, and Metal Ray. The only deck that came up more than once there is Toad Giratina. There are decks. It's a fairly easy to play deck, and there are really good lists available online. So, yeah, it probably does make sense that it does better in seniors. As for the variety, seniors never seems to really split out into a metagame like Masters does, because you don't get so many people that are really, really worried about winning, so only going to play the best deck. And that was Houston. If we look at Arizona, going down, we had Seismitoad Giratina. It says Archie's, which I'm assuming is Blastoise. Sableye, Garbodor Bunnelby, same thing, but you're also blocking abilities. I love that deck, that sounds awesome. Night March Archeops, Eviltau, Seismitoad Giratina, Blastoise, and Ray Eels. So in seniors, we're seeing still Blastoise there. We are seeing Naffle Eviltau, one in Arizona. We're seeing a lot more variety in seniors. And we're seeing Seismitoad Giratina coming out. We saw 5 of them in total out of the 16. That's about a third of the metagame. And we saw it winning one and coming second in the other. My only explanations are there are good lists available online and it's easier to play. So yeah, that's kind of cool. And they're the senior results. So yeah, that's about all I've got to say about regionals. If you disagree with anything I've said, if you've got anything to add, please do email me at ptcgradio@hotmail.co.uk or hit me up on Twitter at @TheWassy. And if Remy or indeed anyone else wants to collate and email me the regionals results, I will be exceedingly happy. And a huge thank you to Remy again. I did go around and look at all of the regionals results. I didn't actually see the seniors like that, so I wouldn't have had them without him. But also, just being able to open my email and seeing just a complete list of the top 8, and I really do stress it's top 8, not top 16 we should be worried about. Just wonderful. Thank you so much for that. Really, really appreciated. And finishing off, and I said it was going to be a shorter one this week. I even planned not to do very much, and then I got waffling on about regionals, and boom, 45 minutes in. I can't help myself. Of course, you guys knew it wasn't going to be a shorter one, because you could look at the running time when you started playing it. I didn't. This is a surprise to me. A genuine surprise. I thought I was going to be out of here in 20 minutes. Anyway, really good bit of news to finish off with, something we should all be happy about. A lovely lady called Becca Manda, the most prolific judge in the UK, and I'm willing to bet one of the most prolific judges in the world. She's been judging Worlds since 2012, so that gives her 4 years of judging Worlds under her belt, and was the assistant head judge in Masters this past year. You could have seen her on the stream if you kind of squinted a little bit. She has just accepted, and this is common knowledge now, so I can share it with you lovely people. She's accepted a job to work for the Pokémon company. She is literally working for Pokémon. Firstly, how much fun would it be to go back and tell your old teachers that you're working for Pokémon now? Yeah, that would be awesome. Also, I just wanted to give a kind of a public congratulations to her, I suppose, because anyone in the UK will know this for a fact to be true, except for one moron who put slanderous rubbish on the internet, which was all complete rubbish. And since she's now been hired by Pokemon, they clearly know it's rubbish as well. And everyone around, people who have met her around the world, seen her at Worlds, will know that I can literally think of nobody more deserving. So, well done to Becca, absolutely thoroughly deserving. The only downside is we're not going to see her judging in the UK anymore, because once you work for Pokemon, well, you can't play or judge. That kind of comes with the territory. And if that surprises anyone, think about it for a second. It should be quite obvious. And that, ladies and gentlemen, it's still slightly shorter than usual, but only by like 10 minutes. I remember, if you go to PTCGRadio.wordpress.com, you can actually find a complete archive of all of the episodes I've ever done, except for 2 that went missing or were never recorded. I never found out which. And if you go back to the first podcast, I'm naively saying 20, 30 minutes a week. I was so young and naive back then. Anyway, I've probably been incoherent and ranty enough for 1 week. Hopefully I've told you all about regionals. Hopefully I've given you a level of detail and analysis which just isn't possible in a written article. So hopefully that's useful to you. If you go into regionals in the near future, you've got 3 choices: Blastoise, Yveltal, or something that counters Blastoise and Yveltal. If you go into any tournament with a deck that falls to either of those, you are not going to have a good tournament. And I'm sorry if that makes you upset, but it's the truth. Notice how Vespiquen hasn't been doing terribly well against Blastoise. Just putting it out there. I'd say Leafeon's a better tech anyway. Also, well, actually, I mean, if they ever go back to Black Kyurem, Zoroark, he's out. Anyway, that's enough for 1 week, ladies and gentlemen. You've got me Twitter, @TheWassy. You've got me email, ptcgradio@hotmail.co.uk. Make sure you check out my YouTube. I have a vanity URL and everything, youtube.com/PTCGRadio. And go check out Wassy Plays. I want a vanity URL for that. So you need to go and find Wassy Plays on YouTube. It's a featured channel on PTCG Radio, or you can just search for it. It's my video game channel. I want a vanity URL. Go and find it and subscribe, because it's about video games and it's awesome. There we go. Vain enough? Awesome. Look after yourselves till next week, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Ross, and you've been listening to PTCG Radio. And thank you for listening. That makes me feel better on these drug-filled, legal over-the-counter drugs and illness-riddled nights.